So the next matchup, as you can see, 48.5 over under. So again, expecting a decent amount of points in this one. Seattle, Detroit. Obviously, last year, this was an absolute blow up, won me quite a lot of money, Tom. Are we expecting that again this year?
It's a game which I've kind of got half an eye on at the minute. I think the Seahawks' issues with their offensive line are going to be big this week. You look at Detroit, their defensive line could be quite frisky against the Seahawks' offensive line, which makes me worry about the Seahawks running game with Kenneth Walker. We saw last week it didn't look particularly special. It might be a matchup which favors Zach Charbonnet more. If they're having to get the ball out quickly because of the troubles they have with their offensive line, then perhaps they start drawing up plays for Zach Charbonnet, those screen games. We didn't see him get many touches last week at all. So possibly, but yeah, it's one of those games where you look at it on paper and you go, okay, well, I like DK Metcalf at the minute. Tyler Lockett was cleared from concussion protocol and returned to the game last week, so he didn't really miss any games. Jackson Smith-Njigba, he only played on 66% of the routes, but he tied for the team lead in targets at 22%. He had a 26% target per route run rate, so that was the best on the team, which is really positive for a guy who's playing with a cast on his wrist. So I like all those players. I think the one player that really stands out to me, well, there's two. I like Josh Reynolds. I think he's still going undervalued. Last week, he had 12 PPR points. He was second in targets on the team. He seems to have firmly taken that wide receiver 2 role for the Lions until Jameson Williams ever takes it back for himself. But also Sam Laporta, he had a really positive start. Possibly not in managed leagues. I wouldn't necessarily be doing this, but in DFS, Sam Laporta had 5 targets last week. The Seahawks have struggled against tight ends. They were dead last in fantasy points allowed to position last year. So I like that. The running backs on the Detroit side of things, I mean, David Montgomery still going $500 cheaper than Jahmyr Gibbs when Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be a part-time player for a little bit. I'll be sprinkling in a bit of David Montgomery with some of the Seahawks pass catchers this week. But yeah, it definitely looks like a prime matchup. And I think if you've got either of these quarterbacks in redraft, you can start them.
Yeah, I'm literally having this conversation. I've dropped Geno for Jared Goff in my home league, and I'm sort of gone back and forth on it about 3 times since. So, but we've got a question from one of our members in the chat. Tarek, he says, biggest debate for me this week, have to choose between Mattison, Montgomery and Kelly if Eckler sits, Goddard and Andrews. He's got 1 running back, 1 tight end and 2 flexes. So should we start with the tight ends? That feels easy. It's Andrews every day, I presume?
I mean, Andrews, it sounds like he's going to play. Baltimore beat writers were saying today that Andrews is moving around on the practice field well. But there is the squeaky wheel narrative with Dallas Goedert and Nick Sirianni. Last year, he came out after the game where Devonta Smith had 0 targets or 0 catches and was like, we have to get him more involved. And straight away, they did get him more involved the next week. So he is a coach who does lean into that. So I don't hate it, but I would be going with Andrews over Goddard. Yeah, just in terms of the running backs, I am probably going with Monty, and then it depends how confident you are that if Eckler does play, which doesn't sound likely, that you have a different option, because otherwise you might be left kicking yourself and wishing you'd played Mattison tonight in a game where you could get a decent amount of receptions.
Yeah, I think for me, you need to play Mattison. I'd go start Mattison, start Monty, start Andrews, and then you've got the decision between Goddard and Kelly if Eckler plays. I think if Eckler doesn't play, then I'd go Kelly. If he does, then I'd go the other way. The other matchup, so before we go on, the Seattle side of things, we were both massive fans of Zach Charbonnet through the off-season. We thought this was going to be a split backfield, but as we can see, Kenneth Walker there, 16 touches, 18 routes. Zach Charbonnet was very much I don't even think you can call him a 1B. He was more of a 2, wasn't he? Do you expect that to continue?
Yeah, I think we're going to see more touches from him. I think the game last week got away from the Seahawks early, and because of that, they didn't get Zach Charbonnet involved. But I fully expect him to see at least sort of 7 or 8 touches this week.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as well. Potentially, Seattle have lost both their offensive tackles. Obviously, their right tackle's gone on IR for 4 weeks, but the left tackle's also injured. If that happens, I'd expect Charbonnet to get more usage because we'll see more screens and more manufactured touches rather than just running ball between tackles and such.